What is the main reason for you to focus on mobility in your past? What was the main reason to help other people like this?
When I originally came into thinking about this, I came from an athletic perspective, is that I had an experience as a professional whitewater paddler where I had a bad injury and it really ended my career. And then, my friends and I had been obsessed with mechanics and performance for as long as we can remember. When I went to physio school, I suddenly had discovered CrossFit at the same time, which was the first time anyone had asked me to be really good at gymnastics, understand Olympic lifting, be competent at powerlifting. And what we discovered was that I had big holes in my understanding of the sort of the depth and breadth of what I should be able to do as a human. As I kind of developed this emerging physiotherapy experience and being a coach at the same time, I saw that most of the athletes we were seeing did not have full positions. We were asking them to perform basic human movements and they couldn't get there. And so the mobility came out of this concept of, hey, do our athletes know what they're supposed to do? And do they have the biomechanical capacity to be able to achieve the base ranges of motion and function that all humans should be able to have?
Okay, I understand. And looking back, has your mind changed because of developed knowledge of the human body, like the knowledge of the myofascial system, different kind of movement and stabilities and everything?
Yeah, one of the things that's happening is that we're living in really like a renaissance. It's an epoch of understanding the internet, sort of our technical grasp of how the physiology works. And we constantly need to layer that new information on and what we know about how we've always trained. The problem sometimes with the minutiae of science is that we lost in the fact that we're really competent as human beings at acquiring skills, of developing athleticism. Go back to the Greek Olympics, people have been very strong and very fit and have run very far for a very long time. But now sometimes what we see is that we don't have to spend a generation of wasted experience to get to that effort. What ends up happening is we've seen best practice emerge so that we can start to solve problems on a scale that's almost a magnitude earlier in terms of what we would have been 10 years ago. And so the new technical understanding refines our thinking and refines and shapes our practice, but doesn't ever excuse us from the basics of running and jumping and lifting and squatting.
Yeah, okay, I understand. For you, what is more important, or better question, what should an athlete work for most? Is it stabilization, mobilization, strengths, or performance to be, in the end, a better athlete?
The question is, what are the key components to athleticism? One of the things that we realize is that when we have a good physical movement practice, a good GPP practice, and in the development of the youth athlete, we can touch on a lot of these experiences. It's important that we understand that if we are looking at the best athletes, they have a very old training age. Our best cyclists have been aerobic athletes since they were in their teens and even earlier. So it's important to say, what are the kind of key constituent pieces that allows us to develop movement fluency, movement competency? Then when I have that base, I can really start to shape that. A good example is the German weightlifting community, the Olympic lifting community. You get a score for clean, you get a score for your snatch, but you also have a technique score. And putting an emphasis on movement quality builds capacity over the long haul. Then you have to say, what's the point? Because is there one of those aspects? When I say mobility, what I'm really talking about is position. Is that important? How strong do I need to be? For a long time, what we said in the last 20 years is, hey, strength solves all problems. And we know that it doesn't solve all problems. It's like saying, I can fitness my way out of this bad shape and bad mechanic. You can't. We're always looking at fitness as a refinable skill. And it's an intellectual contest. And as we know that if athletes play a professional sport or become more specialized, their bodies start to become more specialized, and we have to spend more time pulling them back into that generality of full capacity. But the whole is, we need to have a language where we can create stable athletes, right, who have competency in movement, and then we can start to shape. So you can't pull any one of those pieces out. And I think what we've learned in the last 10 years is that you can work a lot harder and be a lot fitter than ever you were.
Yeah, okay. What do you think about CrossFit, the hype about CrossFit, and all the possible advantages for the human beings who wants to do sports and work out in a group? What do you think about this?
Well,
in total?
we have been engaged with CrossFit for the last 13 years. We opened the 27th CrossFit gym in the world. And what I can tell you about CrossFit, it's one of the first cogent movement systems. It's not the only one. Yoga was trying to do the same thing. Pilates was trying to do the same thing. If you look at the great kettlebell work out there, it's trying to do the same thing. But CrossFit was one of the first experiences for people where they had the first time they had formal exposure to Olympic lifting, to a powerlifting, to some of the gymnastics basics. And so put that higher intensity, getting people to work hard, getting people an excuse to belong to each other, that's a recipe for really continued success. People ask me, is CrossFit hype? And I'm like, well, front squatting and running is not a gimmick, right? Deadlifting and doing pull-ups, this is not show, this is real fitness and capacity. The question remains, how fit do I need to be? The original tenet of CrossFit was to be able to respect your time, develop your athleticism, and then go out into the world and have a sport experience. Be better at skiing, be better at running, be better at kayaking. The problem sometimes is that we become a little zealous and a little excited, and all we want to do is fitness without any context. So fitness without context is like a big engine in a car you never drive. So it's important that we're always reminding ourselves why we're doing it. And it's okay to spend your fitness a little bit. It's okay to get loose some pull-ups. But on the whole, you can't get around a sort of more complete way of developing basic capacities in average people.
Yeah, okay, cool. In a normal training session, how many % of the time should an athlete spend on mobilization? And how do you balance or unbalance it in the warm-up session or later in the cool down?
A good question is, where does mobilization and the concept of working my biomechanics fit into a typical training hour? We look at that hour as a magical hour. In that time as a coach or I'm working with athletes, I need to probably address their sleep and nutrition. I got to get warmed up. We need to prep the movements that we're maybe not be skilled at, right? We actually need to get stronger. We're going to do some conditioning. And by the way, maybe some gymnastic skill work. And then we're going to cool down. And all in that has to happen in that magic window. We tend to take all the joint mechanics and joint mobilizations. We might front load the training session as we warm up. So we'll do some warm up, we'll get hot, we'll open up the joints based on what we're doing for the day. And then we really want to save all the soft tissue work for afterwards. Class ends, come over here, let's either do 10 or 15 minutes of down regulation, let's get you shut down and turned around, or why don't you do that when you get home? Let's look at the gym as a miraculous place where we're training and developing skill, and some of the soft tissue work we should be putting onto the athletes to do at home.
Okay, cool. Your book, Becoming a Supple Leopard, your Mobility What page, and other books are very popular, not only in the CrossFit world, everywhere. Everybody's reading them.
It's because the pages are made of chocolate.
Yeah, something
Right.
like that, exactly. What was your intention to writing this book or giving the content of mobilitywatt.com open to everybody?
When we originally started this project, the mobility project, I was coming home and telling my wife, I was like, look, I'm seeing the same problems, the same patterns over and over again. Right now, really, we're in a time in the strength and conditioning world where we're seeing a lot of what we call induction. We're seeing a lot of raw data, a lot of experience, and we're overlaying patterns in ways that we never could before, which is really the marquee of the sort of enlightenment. That's Sir Francis Bacon 101. And what we were seeing is finally the gymnasts were talking to the powerlifters, talking to the Olympic lifters. We're all in the same room, we're all friends. And the amount of information that we could see and sort of correlate became very high. One of the things that we tried to do is, I wanted to unload what I thought was non-skilled care. As a physical therapist, I was like, why are you coming to me to tell me that your calves are tight? Like, that's not skilled care. So we embarked on a project, trying to do the right thing. Hey, let's just film. I told one person about it. We made one video a day for a year, and then it turned out we had a lot more to say. And by empowering people to be able to take a crack at fixing themselves, we're able to sort of advance the conversation about what it is we think people should be responsible for. And that was able, again, to shift. And if you look at the evolution of the mobility WOD, the conversation has become much more sophisticated as the community's become more sophisticated, as we've become more sophisticated. So the intention was, first and foremost, if we give people better information, they'll make better decisions. We always are talking up, but we're in a time where There's so much information out there, and yet it feels like everything is fractured and disparate when really there are these underlying key first principles that we can all agree on. Then you can take that body, because it's the same shoulder for the last 10,000 years, and do what you want with it.
Yeah, okay. Did you ever thought that mobilitywatt.com or the books will be that successful and that famous on the CrossFit and everywhere planet?
Yes.
Okay.
No, we never had. Here's what's interesting is that, there are really good coaches in the world who say something like this, and I forget who it is, but I'll paraphrase. If you chase the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of wealth will get jealous and follow. And we were always talking with our coaches, like no one should ever set out to be famous or to have notoriety. You should set out to do the right thing. And all of my friends who have had good success on the internet have been teaching. They're teachers. They've been putting everything they out, and they've been transparent. And I'll be frank, I learned from a model of transparency and generosity from my coaches. Mark Rippeteau, Greg Glassman, right? Mike Bergner, some of my original seminal coaches were like, come hang out with us, come learn with us. We'll show you everything we learn. And that openness really served as a model for the underpinning of all of this.
Yeah, okay, cool. What are your next projects to improve the human being life?
We feel like we have projects for the next 10 years. What we're really trying to do consistently is say, hey, let's take the highest concepts out of sport, highest performance. This is the laboratory where we really get to test the physiology under high conditions. Like you go to IKEA and they have the machine that makes the chair wear down fast. We can find out what the weak spots are. Our idea always has been if we can translate what we're learning in the highest levels of sport and performance backwards and apply those lessons to moms and dads and kids, then sport is no longer just circus, but sport is the evolution of who we are. It's the laboratory of the physiology of what's possible. So now what we're realizing is we can take some of those ideas and start apply them to the workplace. What is it we understand about posture that's so important? How are we realizing that athletes that sit all day long end up having more problems than athletes who move all day long? Well, what are the implications on my kids at their workstation? So we're very proud of our newest project. It's called Deskbound. My wife and I have written a book that we really feel like is going to translate the concepts of sport and performance into the everyday life, which is what we really need to do. We've got that. We're trying to solve back pain. How do you solve, getting off the airplane and not be broken? There's a lot of things we need to work on.
Okay, cool. Two more questions, and you can.
Yes, these are my real.
Evening.
These are my real calves. Everyone on the internet wants to know: are these my real calves? They're my real calves.
How important is the test and retest procedure for me as an athlete, for example, and how can I handle it when I work alone?
Test retest is a key concept around what we're doing. One of the things that is sort of gets lost in some of the less scientific empirical information is that we fail to use logic, and that what I need to do is see if I can make change. All the things that we talk about are observable, measurable, and repeatable phenomenon, right? This is an old language. That is the root of the scientific method. And so what I need to do in the test retest is, one, for my own athletes, see that the change in position, it correlates to the thing that we just did, right? We're trying to affect position. Let's see if it actually made it. We're not interested in passive range of motion. We're not even interested in active range of motion. We're interested in how those pieces come together as the functional piece, right? How does my whole system work when I squat? And when we tie the test retest together, people can start to draw the correlation and the relationship between why we're trying to improve position or the limits of their position. So not only does it validate our experience in the clinic and in the gym for everyone, but it also makes it important and to the athlete, because they can certainly relate to, hey, I improved my position through this. That improved position results in more power, more wattage, better times. And that's really the outcome. It's the expression of the movement position that matters.
Okay. Last one. If I start from scratch as a total sports beginner, no matter my age, for how long, what do you think it might take to improve my mobility when I'm sitting all day in the office, for example? When I work with the Leopard book, for example, 10 to 50 minutes a day?
A common question is, how long does it take to improve my position, improve my mechanics? Well, it's a little bit multifactorial. And that, first and foremost, what are the environmental loads on the human? And this is where we can start to make big changes in the health and lifestyle of people. One of the things that we advocate for a lot is, what's your sleep quality look like? People are not correlating basic activities, how much walking I do, the quality of my food, am I drinking and absorbing enough water, am I sleeping well enough, am I getting good quality sleep? What we see is that if we start to make small changes in that, it aggregates into creating a system where then I can start to see healthier tissues. Now I've created a basis that the first thing that we say once we've got that in and we're working on that is, hey, let's develop a movement practice. Before we just go and start pushing and pulling and rolling, we want people to be in a coached environment. We think you should be getting some instruction, and it doesn't matter. We remain agnostic about what it is. Go start triathloning, go jump in a Pilates class, go start in yoga. And while you're in your movement practice, because that's the most important thing, we can start to address the quality of your movement and positions. We know that for some people, it comes right away, but the stiffer you are, the older you are, it takes a little bit more time to back out. What we've seen is that we can make massive amounts of change very quickly, but that your position as a skill can take a lifetime. But we want to remind people, muscles and tissues are like obedient dogs. Yeah. It's just you who's the bad dog owner.
Okay, and just one question from me. What is your pool of inspiration for your work? Where is it coming from?
Well, that's so, where am I inspired? It's easy. I'm married to the greatest woman on the planet. We live in a community of, like, all our friends are really amazing coaches and thinkers, artists, musicians, and we're really inspired by the work that goes on. And so, there's a notion that inspiration happens in a vacuum by yourself, and it's not. I'm a product of the system, I'm a product of my friends, that our experiences together shape how we think and how we teach. With that said, I will tell you that I do a lot of reading widely out of my field. And what I'm seeing is that more and more that people have solved these problems and solved so many other problems that we can apply back to our own thinking in other fields. The problem is that we've been siloing that information for so long and we haven't seen how all of the interconnected, the consilience of the system. And so, our inspiration really is, we are living in the greatest epoch in human performance of all time. And, there's a lot of work to do. We're beginning to understand something. What we're beginning to understand is that we're beginners, and now we have something to start to work with.